religion in general and Christianity in particular has had kind of a child's way of looking at things. And I think when you talk to people, you'll hear them say that all that they know is what they learned in the catechism as children. Well, that's not enough for adults. You have to grow up. Part of growing up is not to take things so literally, to be able to see them more deeply and more subtly and with more complexity. If Christianity doesn't give up this childlike literalism, it's going to fade away.
The Medicine Path podcast is an ongoing exploration into the intersections of spirituality, depth psychology, and psychedelics. The Medicine Path is a wholly independent and listener-supported project, so please consider becoming a supporter at patreon.com/medicinepath or by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. You can find out more information at medicinepathpodcast.com. Now, here's your host, Brian James.
Welcome to the Medicine Path podcast. I'm your host, Brian James. On this episode, I'm honored to welcome back to the podcast author and psychotherapist Thomas Moore, who I previously had on episodes 57 and 75. Tom has been a constant companion on my own medicine path, and one of the key inspirations and mentors for my approach to counseling others on their journey toward living a life of deeper meaning and purpose. I've had the privilege to study with Tom over the past year in his soul psychology course, and through that process have gotten to know him and myself a little better. To round off the series of interviews I've been conducting as part of an exploration of my relationship to Christianity, I thought it would be fitting to speak to Tom about his journey with Christianity, particularly how the teachings and model of Jesus have informed his soulful approach to life. We focus our conversation primarily on his 2009 book, Writing in the Sand, Jesus and the Soul of the Gospels, which offers his unique insights into the deeper meanings of Jesus' teachings and how they can help us create a happier and more meaningful life, free of dogma and fundamentalism. Well, I hope that you're nourished by our chat as much as I was. Now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Thomas Moore on the Medicine Path. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce Thomas Moore once again. Tom, it's great to see you, and I really appreciate you making the time to speak with me.
Well, I've been looking forward to it, Brian.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. On your online course, every time we start a session, we always begin by talking about the weather and wondering what the weather's like for you on the East Coast there.
It's cold and sunny today. I wish you could see outside where I am right now, looking through the windows. I live on a lake, and the sun is kind of low in the sky, and it's just beautiful. But it's very cold, cold. I don't know the numbers that you use, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, it's probably around freezing, I guess.
Yeah, about freezing, exactly.
Yeah, I spoke to a friend in Vermont the day before yesterday, or maybe yesterday, and behind her was a window looking out on her property, and everything was covered in snow with these big flakes softly falling. And
yes,
she looked all cozy in a big sweater, and I just thought, here on the West Coast, it's still pretty mild.
Yeah,
and it just looks so idyllic, and it just gave me that cozy feeling that I kind of miss.
It's very cozy until you have to go somewhere. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think as I mentioned in our correspondence, and as people who listen to the podcast will know, I've been going on this journey through Christianity and looking at it from different perspectives, theological, the mystical, Jungian. And it's been a really kind of personal journey for me, wrestling with my relationship with Christianity.
Yeah.
And I know the conversations have been really resonating with people out there. So I know I'm not alone in this, trying to figure out like where Christianity fits in my life. It's something that I feel I have to reckon with as part of my spiritual inheritance. And it's always nice to come back to Tom Moore. You've got just such a kind of balanced view of things. I think probably owing to you being a Libra, right? You just had a
Yes,
birthday
yes,
recently.
yes, it's Libra, absolutely. Yeah,
And
I can never make a decision, but I have a pretty balanced view of things.
yeah, well, it's something I feel like I'm maybe growing into, and I think something that you inspire in me is to, um, like Jung would say, hold the tension of the opposites. Be that central point between and this Libra scales, right? Not go
Yeah,
too heavily on one side or the other.
that's right.
I really like that. So I've been reading your book, Writing in the Sand, Jesus and the Soul of the Gospels. And I know you wrote it probably about 12 years ago or so,
Hmm.
but I'm really loving it. I think it's great.
Oh,
So
good.
I hope you're okay with talking about some of the themes in that.
Absolutely, sure.
Great. Well, I would really love to hear a little bit about your journey with Christianity. It's been an interesting one, I know. And some people who know your work may not know that the early part of that journey, especially, and kind of your own wrestling with Christianity.
Well, it's a long story. I'll try to make it short. I first of all, I have to say I was born into a very devout Irish Catholic family, a working class family, very close to Ireland. I mean, not too far away. And I realized I've spent a lot of time in Ireland over the years and nowadays. And I realized that my family is so Irish. It's unbelievable. Now I go to Ireland, it's like the same as my family. So that Irish Catholicism was very strong. It means it's devout, quite simple in many ways, and quite literal. And so I became an altar boy in the church where we went to church, and I went to a Catholic school. So I had a lot of Catholicism in my early years. And so by the time I was 13, I had become quite acquainted with the priests who were running the parish there, and with young men who were going off to study to be priests. And I was quite infatuated with the whole idea. Some people would say brainwashed, but I don't know the difference really. I was infatuated, and I wouldn't hear of anything. I had to go and join these wonderful young men I knew who were going off to become priests. And it so happened that the priests in the parish where I grew up were called Servites, which means they were kind of half monks and half parish priests. And so I joined that organization. I had to leave home at 13 and go off to this place. I grew up in Detroit, and they were in Chicago, so I had to go, quite a ways from home to join them at a very young age. And it was a very cool atmosphere emotionally, kind of strict and cool, but I got a tremendous education in the classics. I had probably 8 years of Latin and 4 years of Greek, and then plus studying the arts and literature very intensely, and theology and philosophy. In fact, I went to Ireland for my philosophy studies for 2 years, and most of the courses were taught in Latin. So I was 19 years old and sitting in this class and the teacher speaking to me in Latin, and I had to answer him in Latin, which was quite when I think of it now, I wonder how I ever passed any of the exams, but I did. And had a, kind of interesting experience that way. And I came to a point where I was, it was a very liberal order. I was educated very, very well in that place. And one day I woke up and I thought, I've done it. I've really done it. I've gone as far as I can with this. And I was only about 6 months before I would have been ordained a priest. And I told the man in charge, I said, it's over for me. And he said, well, why don't you take a year to sort it out? And I said, no, it's over. I know. I discovered that this morning. And so I left there and thought I would have nothing to do with religion. I left Catholicism and Christianity and everything, all religion. I had no interest. I just wanted to get out of it. I felt I've given a lot of time, part of my life to this, and I've done it. Now I don't have to do any more. And I continued studying, and I went to the University of Windsor in Ontario, and I got a degree in theology from there. And one of my professors said to me, I should get a PhD in religious studies. And I said, I don't want anything to do with religion. And he said, this will be pretty good. He said, this program is really good. You'll like it. So that was Syracuse University in New York. And they asked me to write a paper about how I thought religion should be taught. And I wrote the paper, and they gave me free tuition and a living stipend and all kinds of things on the basis of that paper. So it must have been pretty interesting. And so I studied there and got exactly what I needed. Exactly. I loved what I did for those 3 years, my doctoral studies. And that's where I discovered Jung and Hillman, James Hillman. And I was really prepared to do my work then. And ever since then, I've been, all my books, I think I'm working on number 32 now. They are all about the things I learned at Syracuse. And also going back to my years in the monastery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had such a great foundation, particularly in the languages. And yeah, that's a big part of this book, Writing in the Sand, is you getting down to the roots of some of the language that Jesus used.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, in particular, you point to 4 words that sum up what you call in the book the Jesus way, like following Jesus as a way of life and a kind of attitude. And I wonder if we could go through those 4 words, because there's a lot of misconceptions about how they've been translated. And I like the way you put it together. So there's metanoia, basileia, agape, and therapia. And you've got this beautiful little poem that I think maybe you wrote that's inserted in the book. And it says, it's like a summation of the Jesus philosophy. It's like a little haiku. I love it. It's change of heart brings you into the kingdom where you discover the power of love to heal.
Yes, that was just a summary up to that point. I felt that was a summary.
Could you go through each of those words individually and unpack them for us? So starting maybe with metanoia.
Sure. That's one that people know. They've heard of. A lot of people have anyway. So metanoia is usually translated as repentance. So it has to do with repenting for something that you've done wrong or bad. But if you think about the word, if you know any, the language, you know that noia is not about morals or ethics or anything like that. It's mind. Nous, it comes related to the Greek word nous, which means mind. So it has to do with your mindset and I think your outlook on the world, the way you understand yourself and the world around you. Meta means, can mean change. It means beyond, but it's like you move beyond, you change. So like metamorphosis usually means like a change of shape. Metamorphosis. Like a butterfly goes through a metamorphosis. You go from, cocoon to a big wing, beautiful butterfly. So that's the good image for metanoia, I think, becoming a butterfly after having been a little worm. And I think that's what the Jesus message is all about, is that what you have to do is go through a change in your being, in the way you see the world and know yourself and know the world, and therefore how you live. It's a change. It's a radical change. I relate it to the Zen idea of satori, or radical change and immediate. Like sometimes all the stories talk about an instant change. Like suddenly your whole outlook on life is transformed in a second because of something you've seen or heard. I think it's like that with the Jesus story, that you hear and see his word. And it's not that you understand it intellectually so much, but you hear it and you change. You can't see the world the same after that.
Mm-hmm. Or perhaps some of the stories, even just being in his presence, would inspire you or somehow create a change.
Yes. Yes, I think that's right. Some of the stories do that. They say just by being in his presence, or in a couple of instances, touching him.
Another term that I've really tried to understand and have trouble with sometimes because of the literal interpretation of it is kingdom, basileia.
Yeah.
And I've come to think of it maybe as a state of consciousness. And I think you get to something close to that in your book. So basileia, how do you understand that, the kingdom?
Yeah, the kingdom. Well, obviously it's not a real kingdom. It's not like he's not the king and you're not supposed to be the subject of a king. Now you're not going to be in a democracy anymore. That would be foolish. But it's an image. I think it's a little, I don't mean to belittle it at all, but I think it's a little like a fairy tale. When in a fairy tale, we say, okay, all the people in the kingdom now fell asleep. The kingdom there in the fairy tale is like an image for where the community is, all the community together, where they are and how they cohere, how they hold together as a community. It's a kingdom. So I think that Jesus is saying now that the kingdom is here. And that's what he says, it's here. It's not coming, it's here. And that means that the life that he is, as I understand it, the life that he is promoting creates a community of people who see the value in this way of living. And they create the kingdom. So the kingdom is like the community or the gathering of people who have seen the value in this teaching and share those values, and they would be the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love thinking of it that way, as the community. We think the community of God, that rather than the kingdom of God is some place up in the clouds with a throne.
No, I think that this is a problem. I'd have to just say it, that religion in general and Christianity in particular has had kind of a child's way of looking at things, but a child's religion in many ways. And I think when you talk to people, you'll hear them say that all that they know is what they learned in the catechism as children. Well, that's not enough for adults. You have to grow up, and part of growing up is not to take things so literally, to be able to see them more deeply and more subtly and with more complexity. And therefore, we have to give up. If Christianity doesn't give up this childlike literalism, it's going to fade away. It can't survive the fact that with all of our technology today, people are smarter than ever. And they are already just drifting away in large numbers from the religions, because all they know is that literal interpretation, and they just can't accept it anymore. And I think the churches, it's up to them to grow up and study more in a much more sophisticated way, like this idea of the kingdom. You don't promise people a pie in the sky. That's old, very, very old-fashioned. We're not going to get anywhere that way. And it bothers me, because I think we need religion. And it's too bad that the churches in so many instances are retrenching. They're digging their heels in instead of moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is a movement of people converting to orthodoxy now. Modern Western people, some famously like Paul Kingsnorth, who kind of started out as a pagan and has converted to, I think, some kind of Eastern Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
almost like, I know I talked to David Tacey, and he sees that as a kind of regressive move
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say. I know David, and I really appreciate his intelligence. Very intelligent man.
He's very polemic, though.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I
It's
know
his
he is.
nature.
I know. But I think that it's true to some extent that it could be going back. And there's a lure in that kind of literal, simple religion, because you can give up that struggle to try to understand things and to adjust your life to a complex world. It simplifies things. The morality is very simple. Do this and don't do that. And, punishment and reward and all those things, they're really for children. On the other hand, I think that there is something about the religions that is certainly worth keeping. I can't imagine my life without many, many religious traditions supporting me. And my background in the Catholic Church and in Christianity, too, it's very rich, extremely rich in ways that people might think don't count, but rich in let's say, the arts, and in the theology is very rich. Some wonderful theologians in the history of Christianity, and a very subtle ones. Some of my favorites are extremely subtle, and so I can understand some draw in that direction to have the established religion that's been around for a long time, instead of kind of the things that are made up as they go today. A lot of very loosely put together so-called religions.
Yeah. I've often kind of wished that I could just be a true believer. Like my life would be so much simpler.
It'd be much simpler.
It's all kind of laid out for you, and you just follow. And there it is. No wrestling involved.
Another way I look at it, when I hear people every now and then tell me that they've converted to Judaism or to Christianity or to Islam or something. And I always think, well, that's pretty good. I congratulate them and I support them, and I warn them about the dangers in it. And but the reason I celebrate it is that it's a step. It's a step along the way, and it doesn't have to be the final step. I'm not at all unhappy that I was a monk, Catholic monk, for 13 years. I'm very happy that I had that experience. I still try to live like a monk. And I like to think like a monk, actually. Just today, or maybe it was yesterday, I had a long conversation about Thomas Merton, a Catholic monk, and I felt so good talking about it. It had been so long. So I think it's a step, and you don't have to make it forever and make it the only thing that ever happens in your life.
This other term that I think is sometimes misunderstood, agape, often just translated as love, but that term love in English, it's complicated and maybe bereft of the kind of multifaceted type of like the terms. It's hard for me to say. Like Greek has many terms for different kinds of love, and we've just got this one kind of love, and then we kind of add signifiers to it or something. Right. But agape, how do you read that word?
I usually translate it as respect or something along that line. I think it has to do with recognizing the deep value of something or somebody, and a desire to be connected to them, to that person because of that. It's not romantic love, so it's not eros. So we can kind of strike that out. That's not what it's about. It's not even philia, which is friendship love, although philia certainly plays a big role in the religious experience. So I think it's it's more like valuing someone deeply and wanting to be connected. That's why the word love is used. I've studied it. I don't know. I can't say that I've come to a conclusion that I feel absolutely certain of, but it's in that direction that I would think of that word agape.
Yeah, in the book, you mentioned that one of the ways it was used in early Greek was in relationship to something like a jewel or a gem.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's
Something
that,
precious and valuable. Yeah.
yeah, sense of appreciation and valuing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even that doesn't quite do it, because in the context, when you read the Gospels in Greek, you come across some form of the word agape over and over and over again, meaning many different things, obviously from the context. Different kinds of love, different kinds of desire and closeness. And so when you finish with that, you think, well, it's very hard to come up with one word to say what that really means. It's because it means many things at once. However, the impression is couldn't be avoided that agape is at the very center of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's something in that too about appreciating diversity. Like if we're to love our neighbors, we have to kind of appreciate that different people are different.
That's right.
And to see the value in that as one of the things that holds together a community.
Well, like in the gospel of Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. He's using the word agape. And so there's an example. You love yourself. How do you do that? And that's interesting that a spiritual teacher would say, love yourself, because a lot of spiritual people think you shouldn't love yourself. Yeah. But it's there. And then there's love your neighbor. So loving your neighbor, how do you do that? And then the examples he gives are something like the Good Samaritan, someone who's of another geographical place or culture, and especially a culture that you're not too friendly with. And he says, love that. It's I think it sounds very much to me like some Indian philosophers and teachers who will say, love your enemy. One of my friends from India, Satish Kumar, wrote a book about the Buddha as loving, befriending a frightening beast that came into a village and community. And that would be an agape word. I think, even though it's befriend, I think it's more like agape. And so I think that's what we're asked to do, is to open our hearts, especially to those people that we are probably disinclined to have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm. And then the last word is, I think, one of your favorite words, therapia.
Yes, it is. The word therapia is used, I forget how many times, 47 times in the New Testament, quite a bit. It's used over and over again. There are books that will tell you how many times each word is used. And I think it's in the 40s. And it's often, maybe almost always translated as heal, that Jesus healed all these people. But I've done a lot of research on this word because I'm a therapist. I really wanted to know what therapy was in its essence. Years ago, I was looking up this word therapy. I got to the deepest I got into it was that therapy comes from a word that means chair, like you're on a throne or something. It's therapy, but I think of it as a therapist chair, where you sit and talk to people in a healing way. Although it doesn't mean healing, I think the word doesn't mean to heal. It means to two things in Greek. It means to serve. That's one thing it can mean. Or it can mean to care for, one or the other. There's been a lot of writing done on this idea of care in relation to therapy by the Greek scholars looking at the language and that kind of thing. And so I think, and therefore in my translations of the Gospels, I translate therapia almost always as care for. Yeah, almost always as care for, in some form of care for. I think that's the whole point, that Jesus was someone who cared. It was a heart word. He wasn't really a magician. I mean, in some ways he was, but he was more a caring person, a caring teacher than a magical healer. Doing the miracles was not really, I don't think he was out there to try to prove anything with miracles. That's the way I was taught when I was a kid. But I don't think that's a good way to look at it. It's more that he teaches caring, deep, deep caring. This is the way to be in the world, that when you're faced with somebody, you care for them.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus as the healer, people sometimes talk about him like a shaman. But the difference that I see in that is that a shaman will kind of go through a big ritual, put on a show, that kind of thing. And Jesus's way to care for, to heal, seemed to come more through relationship. Like you said, it's like the way of the heart.
Yes, I think that's right. And that's consistent with the whole teaching. But at the same time, it's a radical teaching because it doesn't make sense according to the usual standards of modern people, the way we live. We don't think of befriending and caring for people that we differ with, people of other cultures that we don't understand. Our first response seems to be to protect ourselves from them, or to somehow defend ourselves. And the Jesus way is not that. He specifically says in relation to people, he even says people who are your enemy, bring that caring attitude toward them. That's what you have to do. That's the way to do it. I think, who I was trying to think of before is that he's like Gandhi, or Gandhi's like him. That Gandhi says, befriend your enemy. And if you can do that, that's a real test. And I think that's the test of people who follow Jesus. If you can befriend your enemy, anyone you perceive as enemy, that's a real test of whether or not you're living this teaching.
Yeah, if you can include the other in your community, if you can allow them access to the kingdom. I mean, the whole teaching around the kingdom has been so kind of exclusive and exclusionary, and that's obviously been a problem.
Well, I think it's quite clear that Jesus was not speaking to a particular culture or group. He was speaking to the world, and he says that in several places, that he came, as he says, he came here. He has this relationship to his Father that's in the Gospel of John. His relationship to his Father who's in the sky. It's another word, by the way, that I work on in that book, is sky.
Heaven.
Yeah, heaven and sky. So his Father's in the sky, and he's always in relationship to that kind of infinite presence, whatever that is. It's very hard to say, but an awareness that he is always, when he speaks and teaches, he is representing this sky being. And so it's something both unworldly in a way and very worldly at the same time. He is both. So Jesus is a little like the messenger. He's like an angel himself, a messenger who goes from between heaven and earth, the sky and the earth.
Yeah. When you start to think of heaven as sky, which is, I think, etymologically correct, it's like, yes, sky we think of as up there, but it's also all around us. Like there's no clear division between the air we breathe and the sky up there. And then, it makes me think about the just the word spirit related to breath, like ruha, and that it's pervasive, and it's around us, it's in us. It's like when he says like the kingdom of heaven is among us. Well, it's kind of like we're in it.
We're in it, yes. We are
if
in
we have
it.
that shift of perspective, the metanoia.
Yes. And so when you go to a Christian church, a community of people who are gathering there thoughtfully and meditatively and prayerfully, you would expect then what you're going to find is all of this spirit, the spirit of accepting the other, of being in relationship to the infinite at every step. It's very hard to use language for that because people have thought about the sky as a place where God is the puppeteer controlling everything here on earth. But another way of looking at it is that this is the way many Christian theologians have described it, is that sky is an image for that which is really so vast you can't say anything about it. And so many Christian theologians developed what they call the via negativa, in the negative way, which is a way of saying that, well, it's the sky, but we don't know anything about that. Anything you say is inadequate. And I particularly think that teaching about the negative way in Christianity, if that were taught to people today, I think it would help make their spiritual lives much more adult and sophisticated.
Yeah, it helps kind of loosen the grip of literalism.
Yes,
because it's like the sky, but it's not the sky as we think of sky. Yeah.
It's, what I do. I compare it to Black Elk, the Native American. If you've read Black Elk Speaks, he talks about the vision he had, and he talks about his grandfathers and grandmothers coming down in the sky, and he saw them in the sky. Well, that's a vision. It's like a dream. It's a vision, and it's real. The things you see in visionary are real, but they're not literal. And that's, I think that would help to see that when we talk about the sky, we're not talking about anything literal, but it's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for you, this touches on the, what William Blake called Jesus the imagination. So what's the role of imagination in kind of mature, healthy spirituality?
That's a very, very complex theme, but it's essential. Yeah, I'm a great follower of Blake. I love the way Blake puts all of that. And I would say that the role of the imagination then is to allow us to speak about, I like to use James Hillman's words that he used later in his life, the powers that are part of life, the life we live, and the world in which we live. There are powers. Like there's the power of beauty. When you have something beautiful, that the beautiful is manifested in some way. That has great power. The power of, let's say, something in nature that is very beautiful. People will come to it at great cost to themselves, to be exposed to it, to have darshan with that beauty, to have some sort of experience of it and dialogue with that beautiful thing for their own spiritual development, enrichment. And they don't have to understand it, it's just to be in its presence. And so I think that this idea of the imagination has to do with being able to give us ways of imagining these powers, being able to see them, to understand, appreciate what they are. And they are, those images are real, but they're in a realm of imagination, not the realm of fact that we live in our day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm. Like in some way, the imagination can help us be in relationship to these great and mysterious and sometimes invisible powers. Like to imagine that the mountain is a deity, or is the holy mountain, or the Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for the Greeks, they honor Aphrodite because they know her power, that the power of sex and sensuality and beauty and the beauty of nature, these are real powers. They're important aspects of life on earth. They're important things to cultivate and to maybe be afraid of at times, and to realize that those powers are going to affect us and move us. But we're not saying that if you find the right mountain, you're going to see this woman there whose name is Venus. That's not the way it works. And yet the images we have, like let's say a statue of Venus, makes that power present in a way. And so it is real, but it's not literal.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the Greeks, in your book, you point to two aspects of Jesus that have parallels with earlier Greek figures, Jesus the Epicurean and Jesus the Dionysian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the Epicurean.
I know you love Epicurus, so
I
maybe
do.
start with that relationship. Jesus
Okay.
the Epicurean.
Epicurus was a philosopher, a Greek philosopher, early one. Like I'm not sure of his dates. I think it was 3rd century, but I'm not positive. And he traditionally he taught. I mean, the way the story goes, his biography, he taught in his garden at his home, and he taught men and women. And he didn't teach only the high-level people in the society. He talked to people who were kind of rejects in some ways. It was very inclusive. And he taught the philosophy that pleasure is one of the most important factors in life. And what we do is seek pleasure, and it's very important to have pleasure in everything we do. But he didn't mean hedonism. It's not that kind of pleasure. For example, with food, he was a vegetarian, and he ate very little, really. He didn't eat a lot. We know that at the end of his life, he asked someone to bring him a grape. It wasn't like he's asking for huge meals. And yet we've come to take that word Epicurean to mean someone who eats too much. But he's a very devout person who talks about the importance of pleasure in life. I think that's very, very important. And so we see Jesus very often in the stories of him dining with people. He dines with all sorts of people. The scholars of the Gospels call this commensality. It's the word they use. Mensa means table. And what he means is that Jesus eats with people at his table that were not necessarily the most respected people. He eats with anybody. That commensality is one of his virtues. He eats with a lot of people. And we have story after story. And there's one interesting story that I love where he's resurrected. He's been crucified and he's resurrected, and his students are out in a boat and they're talking about Jesus and they wish they could see him again. And they see this fire on the beach, and as they get closer, they realize someone's cooking on the beach. And as soon as they see him cooking fish, someone says, "It's Jesus."
He's having a bonfire on the beach. Cookout.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then that's him. They recognize him.
That's how they know him. Yeah,
And there's another one. I have to say, he's resurrected again, and he appears to his students in their room. He just appears to them, and he says, "I have resurrected." And he says, "Is there any food?" That's the next statement right after "I have resurrected."
Really?
Is there any food?
That's great.
And I'm not making this up. There's actually at least one book I know of that's been written about Jesus and food, and going through all of these different stories. So that's part of the Epicurean nature. He gathers people together. The Last Supper is a gathering of his friends, and he makes a big deal of where to have it and what to have there and who's going to be present. And he kind of, he's also the kind of the planner. He takes.
He's like a host, yeah.
He's the host.
I mean, funny, we use that word for the
right.
The wafer, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So and the whole mystery of the Last Supper is so great, and yet it's all about dinner food. So I think that all of these and many, many other indications of Jesus is quite Epicurean in his style. And yet, I think Christianity has been just the opposite. At least I know that the way I experienced it was don't have any pleasures. If anything looks good to you, you can't have it.
Mm-hmm. In fact, in some orders, it's about suffering.
Yeah, it is about
wearing a
suffering.
hair shirt all day
That's
long.
right. Yeah, that's right. So Epicurus would never wear a hair shirt. So I know, but I think most people probably wouldn't do that. But I don't think we are taught the full story unless we include, when we teach the story and how to live this life, that we have to seek pleasure too, like good pleasures. And the main pleasure that Epicurus taught was friendship.
Mm-hmm.
He said that friendship is the deepest pleasure, and that's what you really have to go for. So that would be a terrific thing to teach within the Christian context.
Mm-hmm. I was talking with someone the other day about this, their relationship to sweets and indulgences. I was talking about how if you slow down and really enjoy the first piece of chocolate, you may find that you're totally satisfied, and then you won't want to eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of about slowing down and enjoying that one grape, like
Yes.
Epicurus.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's not overdoing with anything, but including food is or alcohol, drink or anything like that. Overdoing it is really it weakens the whole thing. It takes away from rather than adds to the experience. So yeah, so there's a kind of a wisdom in that moderation that's included in Epicureanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something, I think when you talk about the kingdom too, you talk about presence. It's a quality of being present. And so there's something about that too, and the enjoyment. If you're really present while you're having that glass of wine or the grape or the piece of chocolate,
Yes.
you're going to really enjoy it and savor it.
Yes. Yes, I think our tendency, we have it, some of us, times, especially maybe in our lives, we might overdo some pleasure that we have. When you overdo, you can bet that you're not really doing it right. That's a sign, that's a symptom. So you watch it and say, oh, I'm eating too much. Well, it doesn't mean you should stop eating. It means you should eat in a better way.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe the flip side of that is what we associate with Dionysus. And so, tell us about the, how do you put it? Jesus the Dionysian.
Yeah. It's not my idea. It's been around for hundreds of years, at least, that people have related, the theologians have related Jesus to the Greek god Dionysus. No, the Dionysian, I have to say a word, it's about life and death, of realizing that when you live life, to really have the full joy of life, you have to also die to things and deal with endings and losses, things like that. If you can do that, where you are dismembered, the myth of Dionysus has him as a child being dismembered. And early Christian theologians connected that myth with Jesus being on the cross, crucified and having nails in his hands and a sword in his side, as dismembering, like a Dionysian dismembering. That's the death part of it all. And the bright part of it would be the joy of life, of really living in ecstasy. The opposite word would be ecstasy in the Dionysian. That you are. The story was you eat the God's flesh and to get the God in you. So that's very close to Jesus too, with eating the flesh, eating bread and drinking wine, as a Dionysian experience. But I think it's also about the way of life, so that following Jesus and his example, you live this life, and you may people may not understand you or accept you when you live that kind of life, a life of caring and not, treating your enemies decently and that kind of thing. People don't like that. People say, well, you're betraying us then. You should be against our enemy. So, and we've had examples like St. Francis. There's a great story of St. Francis going over to talk to one of the sultans in the Arab countries. And he was a scandal to a lot of Christians because he shouldn't be consorting with those enemies. But he understood this is the Christian way. This is the way to do it. You love your enemies. That means you talk to them, and you get to know them, and that's what St. Francis did. So I think that's Dionysian as well, and with Jesus, Dionysus is also associated primarily with wine, because when you drink wine, especially if you have a good portion of wine, you get kind of wobbly, or you kind of get dismembered in a way through the wine. The wine does that. It intoxicates and inebriates. And so Jesus was called the Dionysian. And then what the theologians took note of was that the very first story about his teaching life, he's at a wedding party. The Gospel of John, he's at a wedding party. And his mother tells him they've run out of wine. That's all she says. It's interesting, his mother would be there with him. And he says, well, that doesn't have anything to do with me. But then he tells the people to look in, to try drink something that was in the jars that were present there for purification waters. So when people came into a house, we don't do this, but in some cultures, people, when they enter the house, they put their hands in water or something with water like that as a symbol or a sign that they are cleansing themselves. They're coming in clean of heart, clean of intention. And Jesus said, take those purifying jars and taste them. So the wine, the wedding planner checked out the wine. He said, this is great. Why do you keep this terrific wine? And maybe nobody's going to get it. You haven't done anything with it. And so Jesus is not only interested in bringing wine into the story, a very first story of his work, but he's really a good maker of wine. And I think that is quite unusual in the stories of spiritual teachers. I think that's something that should be celebrated, that Jesus is Dionysian. That's part of his reality. And that's about joy. Now, Carl Jung, I wish I had this quote with me, because there's a wonderful quote from a letter from Carl Jung to Freud, where he says that if only Christianity would embrace the ecstatic joy of the Dionysian world, many, many problems would be solved. He doesn't use those words, but that's the sentiment.
Yeah, I love that, because the parallel between Jesus and Dionysus is sometimes used by people who want to discount the historical Jesus and just say, well, it's just like a modification of an age-old story or something like that. But I like how you draw out how it's the qualities that are parallel in the celebration and the renewal of life and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, I have a very good friend who's written some books about Jesus as a myth. And I think that I like what he's written. I think it's quite interesting. But that's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that Jesus has qualities like we can. You and I could have qualities. We could be Dionysian. We could be Hermetic. We could be Venusian, We could be all these things. And what it means is that this is a quality that maybe we haven't really cultivated, but it's in us by nature.
Yeah. So going back to the idea of Jesus, the healer, Therapeia. I mean, you point out that healing was one of his primary activities in the Gospels. And when you're talking about what it means to be a healer, you say that we can all be healers if we embody some of these Jesus qualities. And you tell a story about how your friend James Hillman kind of served this role for you at a really tough time in your life. Can you share that anecdote? Because I think it sums up your idea here about how we can all be healers.
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, that story, there was a time when I was, things were falling apart for me. The main thing was that I was at a university, assistant professor at a university in religious studies, and loving it and wanting to teach there all my life. And one day they told me that they didn't want to give me tenure. They wouldn't keep me, in other words, in the post. And I was shocked because I had worked so hard to, be a good teacher there. I understood that my philosophy of teaching was different from the people around me. So I wasn't too much of a surprise, but I was really, I remember I had to go to the doctor several times right after that because I was having so many symptoms from just coming out of me, this anxiety and disappointment and disillusionment. So Jim Hillman and I were good friends, and we often went out to dinner together. And I just put my earpiece in my water. I hope I don't
It's
get
happened to me
electrocuted.
before.
So Jim came over to my house. He knew what was going on, and he brought a bottle of wine with him. And by himself, I've always been with him. Well, we used to go out to dinner, but he didn't come over to the house too often. It was usually with groups, with a lot of people. And so he came over. He just showed up at my door one night, and he said, "Look, we've got to just drink and talk." And so we had a glass of port, I think it was, and we sat there, and he gave me some really good tips, I think, about how to handle it. He had been through a lot himself, tremendous amount, much worse than I had. And I remember one thing he told me that night was, he said, "Look," he said, "I know you're he said, it's depression, the loss of this career and everything." He said, "I would suggest that you put it in a suitcase. Think of it that way. Put it in a suitcase and carry it around with you, but don't identify with it.
Your depression. Put your depression in a imaginal suitcase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carry it with you. Like don't try to get rid of it.
No.
But don't identify with it. Don't get too wrapped up in it.
That's it.
And then the suitcase, you can put it on the table every now and again and take a look at it and maybe feel into it.
That's right.
Put on your depression for a while.
Was that the story you were referring to?
Yeah. Well, I just love that, how what therapy in the kind of real world can look like between, just average normal people. Yeah. Like how we can all be healers by just being a friend to others and listening and talking and sharing a bottle of port if need be,
Yeah. Well, neither Jim nor I drank very much, but for us to have a tiny glass was quite an event.
Wow. It sounds Dionysian.
It was. Well, it was, wasn't it? That's exactly what it was. And he was very aware of, symbol and image. He knew what was going on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, one aspect of this that you do talk about in the book is, so part of him being a healer is also him exorcising demons.
Yes.
And, how do you read these stories now, and how might these stories about exorcism, how might we draw some meaning from them today in the modern world?
Well, I think most of us probably know what it's like to be possessed. You might be possessed with, you might go out looking for a car or a house or something, and you find something that you really like, and you are possessed. Like you can't stop thinking about it, and you tell people, and you try to get some money together. At least that's my experience of it. And that's a possession. We all get possessed at times. You might be possessed by jealousy. I mean, I went through that, I think, when I was in my late 30s. I went through a terrible time of jealousy for a while. And it was just awful, just terrible, definite a possession. And when it left, I knew it was like, it just left within a matter of minutes. It just left like a possession, like a demon coming out. So I think it's a real thing that we could possess. We get possessed by so many things. Some are more subtle than that, but we do get possessed. It's a real thing. And part of caring for people is to help them with their possessions, what they're possessed by. And like, a lot of people are possessed by religion, they think it's a good thing, but their whole will is gone. They're away. They're not even present. And their friends have a very hard time getting through to them. So in order to find the way, how do you exercise that? How do you get rid of it? Not easy. It's not easy. It's almost like you have to know the right act, the right ritual, the right gesture to be able to help people get beyond those possessions.
Yeah. Or maybe related to that kind of fundamentalism is being possessed by like a self-righteousness.
Yes. Oh, yes. You can be possessed by anything, really.
Yeah, but like, so as going back to that idea, like that we can all be healers, how can we help someone to exercise their demons, whether it's addiction or grandiosity or, fixation on an ideology?
It's very difficult. I think the first step is to be able to befriend that person, so show your friendship, and then show that your purpose is not to interfere with them and change them. Your purpose is to be with them in this and try to, help them deal with it in any way, they want to or can. You don't come in and say, oh, I'm going to drive out that evil spirit from you. It may be necessary to be there. A lot of times these possessions in the end are actually quite good. They have benefits. So you don't.
Like you said, it could be a good stage that you just need to go through.
Absolutely. It could be something you have to go through. It's a step along the way. And I think that way about my, when I mentioned I felt this jealousy at a point in my life, it's very embarrassing. I hated that, didn't want to have to.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. And yet I've often thought that this happened when I was really beginning to be a therapist. And I often thought that was my initiation, because after that was over, I really felt even during it, I felt I could do therapy okay. But I felt that once that I went through that I had really come somewhere through it. Not that I learned anything. I don't know if I learned anything, but I went through it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And yeah, kind of really going through that, really being possessed by something for a period of time. When it leaves you, it does feel like a purification or an exorcism of that particular demon. And of course, there's some others lined up behind that one.
Yeah, there's always something.
Ready to take their turn.
There's always something. But it's like steps of initiation. And so I think the stories of Jesus exorcising demons, if you read it, again, not so literally, it's very, very good and very helpful,
really. You've described yourself as a Zen Catholic.
Oh, yeah. That was a while ago.
Well, I love this description. You said that your spirituality is so baked into life that it's almost invisible. it's so baked into your life that it's almost invisible. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, first of all, do you still identify as a Zen Catholic?
Yes, I do, certainly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would.
What does that mean?
Yes. Well, what it means to me is that having grown up Catholic, and then really in a way left it at a certain level, certain kind of Catholicism. But I was writing something in a new book the other day, and I wrote this sentence that as a Catholic, this is how I feel. And I thought, that's unusual for me to say as a Catholic. But I do feel that once a Catholic, always, and that's who I am. And that's my identity very deep down. And I'm happy with it as I interpret it. I'm not happy with what the Catholic Church is doing these days, generally. But so it's not about an institution. I'm not even, I'm not even at a point where I used to be very involved in the Catholic liturgy, the rituals. And I'm a musician, so I did an awful lot of work with the music of Catholic rituals. Mm. I conducted Gregorian chant for years, and I wrote music for the masses, for the the rituals, and it's being in the monastery. We did these things very, very thoroughly. I mean, we did every little piece of it with long chants, and we had to learn all these songs and things. So, but even now, I love it, but I don't miss it. I don't want it anymore because of the associations. I think if it were a certain context, I could do it, but where the church has gone, I just can't go with them at all. And they don't want me. That's been clear. So I still get, I mean, no, I don't know if I still get, but over the years, I've had many invitations to speak in Catholic churches. And I feel that they've been invitations from very open-minded priests and sisters who invited me. I remember once, though, this is probably totally irrelevant, but I was invited to speak at this very large conference. And it was in Los Angeles at a convention center. So it's really big. And I had a driver come to pick me up to take me to this place. And we arrived at the doors to go in, and I'd say about 50 people were walking in front of the doors with, with signs protesting. So I asked the driver, I said, "Oh, what are they protesting?" He said, "You." And I was so surprised. I didn't think I was really worthy of protest. But so I've had the trouble that way, but at the same time, to me, to be Catholic is very rich thing. And I think people today can be very good Catholics. I know they can. I have friends who are very good Catholics, and they get so much from it. Tremendous. Now, I also have got a lot from Zen. I get my Zen from a lot of reading. I've read I learn everything through a book. I mean, everything. I learned how to swim from a book. I'm just a book person. And so I've done most of my Zen through reading, but I have many Zen friends and have been to Zen situations. So I feel that the Zen as I know it is a good complement to my Christianity, because Zen is the Zen I like, the Zen that I appreciate, is that kind of Zen that doesn't make anything, make anything too big. You kind of I think Zen is about pulling the rug out from under almost anything that you settle on. It's trying to keep you open and fresh. So combining that with being a Catholic, I think it's a pretty good combination. So I keep calling myself a Zen Catholic.
Interesting. Are you working on a new book that has something to do with emptiness, right?
Well, yes, I thought you were talking about another one, but yes, I have a book coming out. I have a book coming out in May called The Eloquence of Silence, which brings in that monk life, a lot of silence in the monk's life, and also the emptiness of the East. So there's a Zen Catholic again.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've done is I've collected a number of 30 stories, some of them traditional stories, most of them traditional stories. People have had a tradition of telling stories about empty things, simple empty things, an empty plate, an empty pot, an empty cup, an empty room, things like that. But the story then is you're supposed to understand that it is about emptiness in the way you are, that your ambitions are empty. You can have ambitions to do things, but they have to be empty. That is, you can't take them literalism gets in the way of emptiness. And let's say too much fervor gets in the way of emptiness. Exclusiveness gets in the way of being empty. Mm-hmm. So this book is really about how to refine our idea of what it means to be empty, and through stories. So I present these stories, and then I offer commentaries on the stories.
Doesn't that, I think this word shows up in the Gospels, kenosis.
Yes.
Doesn't it have something to do with emptying out?
As far as I know, it doesn't actually appear in the Gospel itself. It appears in St. Paul.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Kenosis means to empty, yeah. Came across that word just yesterday. I was using the word cenotaph in my writing. Cenotaph means like a tomb. That is not where the body is, but just a tomb that's a memorial. So it's empty. It's an empty tomb. So it's like that, empty, like that would be a story, an image of emptiness right there. So you think about what that implies. What kind of emptiness is that, One of the stories is Jesus, right? They go to the tomb and they find it empty. It's a big emptiness. Big emptiness story in Christianity. Maybe the biggest one.
Yeah, not one that has been made much of, I think, because you also talk about the one story in the Gospels, the woman carrying the big jug of, I think, grain, and as she's walking, it gradually, she doesn't realize one of the handles is broken and it's emptying out by the time she gets home. And you say that relates to, I think, the idea of the kingdom.
Yes, that's the kingdom. Well, it's not me. That's from the Gospel of Thomas. And it says at the end of the story, or at the beginning, I forget which, this is a story of the kingdom. Or this is what the kingdom is, something like that. And then we have this story. The kingdom is like that. It's like a sack that has a hole in it. Doesn't sound too promising. And yet, when you think of emptiness, it makes sense.
Yeah. So if I empty myself of all my prejudices and preconceptions, then I'm kind of open to that, the larger sense of community and accepting people for who they are and inviting them in.
That's right.
All of that. It's very important. I can see the Zen Catholic thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's where it comes in. Kenosis, but going back to that, you just mentioned there, emptying. That's what kenosis is. It's the emptying of oneself. So that's what they were referring to Jesus as, emptying himself to let the will of the Father be expressed, emptying of his own will. So on the cross, he says, not my will, but yours be done, something like that. That's emptying, that's kenosis.
Makes me think about like getting together with a friend when you're feeling down or burdened with something and talking it out.
Yeah, talking it out, emptying it. Yeah.
Emptying yourself, and that may be taking the place of the formal confession.
Yes,
in the church. Yeah,
that's right. I never thought of it that way. The confession could be a kenosis in a way, kind of an emptying.
Yeah.
The other word for emptiness where things are empty is shunyata. That's Sanskrit. So that's from the eastern side. Shunyata. is been much written about in the East. Many, many long treatises about shunyata and emptiness. So it's a very big thing in the East, emptiness. But it's not so big in the West because we don't even worry about being empty.
Yeah, we want to keep filling ourselves
we
up.
We want to fill up.
One thing I wanted, I'm kind of bringing it around to how your whole journey and your kind of invisible spirituality shows up in your life. And I know that your wife is a practicing Kundalini yogi, right?
She was. She isn't anymore. Yeah, she was.
Okay. Yeah. I think at the time that you wrote the book, she still was.
Yeah, she would be. Yeah. Yeah. That was only recently that she changed. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think even your daughter, she's pretty well known in the kind of Kundalini scene as a singer.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess that you don't think that it's particularly or especially important that that a couple shares the same spiritual beliefs and practices. Is that right? Or has there been?
I think it's a good thing, really.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, because then you're not fusing. Jim Hillman used to always complain about fusing in relationships, fusing. He said that's what makes them all fall apart. They fuse. And so that kind of being in the same spiritual place, I mean, it can be very nice. I understand that. Couples to be able to share that. But there's also value in where you don't share the same thing, because you don't have to do it all together. It's like there's some variety. I think it's also good for children to have variety instead of one thing. So our kids, I have 2 kids, and when they were small, we would go to the Catholic Mass with them on Sundays very often in a sort of monastic setting. And so they got that, and then they learned all the Sikh Kundalini stuff from my wife. We knew a lot of people in that community, so we knew a lot about. And I felt I got a lot from the association with the people I met and knew, and some of the ideas that I picked up from their community. So I thought it was an enriching experience. I don't see the need to have it a shared thing.
It's interesting. I'm just noticing the time, but I did want to talk about this maybe to finish on this point.
Okay.
So we've talked about Jesus in his kind of different roles and the different aspects of him, and but we haven't talked a lot about the Christ. And you say that the secret of the meaning of the Gospels lies in the word Christ. It represents the transformation from ordinary unconscious living to a life on fire with meaning and purpose. And then you go on to talk about the Christ nature in relationship to like Buddha nature. So is Christ nature, do you see that as being different than Buddha nature and offering its own unique things?
Yes, I think it's different. Yeah, the Buddha is not Christ.
Well, some people, the kind of perennialists, would say that there's one being incarnating in these different forms.
I know. I don't buy it.
Yeah, me neither.
To me, they are different, and it's good that they're different. But I see Christ. The word Christ means oil, and like chrism means oil. I think I don't know if it's that place, but I have a chapter heading somewhere where it say the man of oil.
Yeah.
That he's
the
oil.
Olive oil man.
The olive oil man. So I figured that's really an interesting thing that people use. Again, that goes back to the theme of spirituality being in the natural world. So olive oil, has this capacity, and we know from many religions, to anoint, to make people, give them great power. Kings and queens sometimes have oil anointing as well. So anointing is one way of I don't know what to call it, initiating a person into their powers, into the powers that they have now. And whether like a priest, when someone becomes a priest, they get anointed.
Mm-hmm.
When someone dies, and dying, they're anointed. It's like they're getting ready for this transformation. And so I think that Christ, it's funny because the word Christ is like saying oil. That's what it is. And that's the essence of what he is then. He has been anointed for this role. And he's the anointed one. It's not a secular role, it's a spiritual role. That's what anointments usually are. Even with the king and queen, there would be kind of a spiritual role. So that makes the Christ so interesting, that it's more than the man Jesus. It may be that the man Jesus is Christ, but Christ is different from the man Jesus. That is, that this is the anointed Jesus, anointed to be at this level where he has the powers and the authority to transform the world, really, to be in that position.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this goes to something that's maybe one of the reasons why people end up picketing your talks at Catholic conventions. But you go on to say that we could all add the name Christ to our names.
Yes.
If we were to dedicate our lives to finding, to living out purpose and meaning.
Yes, we could be anointed to really do this job. I think that's what we do with priests. We anoint them to be priests. And if they were really doing the job, priests, when you think of it in other religions, especially, think of it in bigger terms. This is a very, very special role to play. And but any of us could be anointed. In fact, I think we are, aren't we, in confirmation and in the Catholic Church, anointed to be? Isn't there an anointing that goes on there?
I don't know.
Sure.
I didn't grow up in the church.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I'll have to look it up. Sorry. I'll look it up. That's my memory from 7 years old. Yeah, I think that the Christ is different and very important. And I think that these images of Christ, as opposed to the images of Jesus, are really good, because what they do, I would also say, this is imaginal man. The Christ is taken out of the realm of the human to be at another dimension. He introduced into the realm of the spiritual imagination, where he plays a role then in the spiritual lives of people, not just as a man, but as a figure. Figure is very important.
With that's something I've been thinking about, is Jesus is embodying the anthropos, the archetype of the whole human, not perfect in the way of all good, but whole, actually, which reminds me of what Jung said: I'd rather be whole than good.
Yeah. I'd rather be bad than whole myself. But
yeah, part of me would definitely enjoys being bad more than whole. Wants to get rid of all the good.
Yeah. I'm not too big on whole.
No? Oh, that's interesting.
No.
So there you part with Jung as well, maybe.
I do, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, wholing maybe is something that is happening but never complete. Would you?
No.
No, not even that.
No.
No pursuit of wholeness.
No.
No, you sound like Hillman.
I think wholeness is a little too. Well, yeah, with Hillman complains because it doesn't primarily allow for multiplicity, or the polytheism of the soul. And my complaint is that there's a sentimentality about it, and sentimentality in these areas tends to weaken whatever it is we're dealing with. Sentimentality, let's all be whole, and I'm reaching wholeness. When you are dealing with the multiplicity, with all the different things that are pressing on you, you don't get much of a sense of sentimentality there. It's a tough job, and you struggle and you get through it, and you are enriched by it, and there's joy, but not wholeness. Yeah. I don't see any need for it.
Well, yeah, maybe it's just the way we think about wholeness, because when you think about the multiplicity, the polytheism of the soul, and all of that, I think about just when we allow for that, that's allowing for wholeness. Like all of the different, doesn't mean mashing them all together into one integrated unit or something.
Yeah.
To me, anyway, it just means
Okay.
kind of opening my mind up to that multiplicity. And
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Could I say something uh, that we didn't follow up on a few minutes ago? I know
yeah.
we don't have too much time, I guess, but
I've got as much
um,
time as you do.
just a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
To me, a very important idea you brought up is this idea of having a spirituality invisible in life, in the world,
Hmm.
in ordinary life. That's what I like about Zen, is that I think the Zen that I follow, which is I get primarily, not only, but primarily from Shunryu Suzuki, who was the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center. I know a lot of his students. I don't know why I just managed to meet a lot of them, but so I have a lot of his writings, and I like what he does a lot of keeping things ordinary and nothing. Like he has one chapter called one of his books called "Nothing Special." It's like I like that approach very much, and so for me, if your spirituality isn't part of your being in the world, the physical world, and doing your life work, and being, having a relationship of some kind, of raising children, whatever it is you do, then to me it doesn't really matter. It doesn't exist. It's probably an escape. The escape aspect of spirituality is very subtle, and I think it goes on a lot more than we would like it to. So I like to be able to. That's what I say. It's either here in the world, it's in my daily life, or it doesn't exist.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. One one kind of image that I always, it's like what I feel like I aspire to in terms of living up my spiritual life is the Zen gardener who he doesn't talk about any of that stuff. He doesn't talk about spirituality. It's just all in
No,
how he carries himself and what he pays attention to.
that's it.
Yeah, and that's what inspires me is
Yeah,
not to be, yeah. Yeah, I like that. The ordinary, nothing special.
yeah.
In that way, if you say nothing in particular is special, then it's all special.
Yeah, that's right. In a way, it's all special. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's right.
Well, I had the honor and the privilege of studying with you for the past year in your online soul psychology course. And I wanted to leave some time here to talk about that course because it's going to be ongoing, right?
Yes, it is.
So, can you say a few words about that? And I mean, just personally, as a bit of a testimonial, it's just really helped enrich my life. And that includes the counseling work I do, but just my everyday life. What you do is you curate stories, poems, ideas, pieces of music, and point them toward, well, sometimes some different psychological concepts, but not always, just aspects of life. And so for me, it's about deepening and enriching your life, whether you're a therapy practitioner or not. And I love your approach with that. Feels like true education to me is you draw things out of people and you kind of through your participation in the course and your engagement with it, you make of it what you want or what you're willing to put into it. Yeah. So just tell us what's happening with that course down the road.
Okay, let me say first, it's been my honor and joy to have you in that course.
Hmm.
Really amazing, because you really take something on and you do something with it, and you have a born leadership, and you brought that to that course. So I'm very, very
Hmm.
happy with that. We're going to continue. What it is, it's six courses in a series, that takes about a year to complete the whole thing, with breaks in between the courses. Each course is 6 weeks long, and each lesson a lesson. There are 6 lessons in each course, so we get 36 lessons in a year. And each lesson, I provide very short readings. It's not about heavy reading. It's very focused. So I select passages from things that I think are worthwhile, very worthwhile. And sometimes, and I include usually a painting or something, a sculpture, something to contemplate with each reading. And then we meet once a week for an hour, and not in Zoom, but in what the platform is called Rizuku, which has sort of a chat typing format, and it allows me to, it's a little easier compared to a Zoom open mic kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I like it very much. It has been beyond my expectations that I've seen people take the course and just change their lives. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if they just pick up my excitement for the ideas. I'm very excited about these things that I teach. I don't teach anything that I'm not really interested in, mm-hmm. that I think is worthwhile. And I tell people when they join that there are 2 principles here, friendship and pleasure. I have Epicurus in mind for both of those words, friendship and pleasure. That's the way he taught. Those were his virtues. And so I try to do that. I try to create a friendly atmosphere, not that everyone has to be friends, but that friendship is the spirit of the thing, as well as finding pleasure, all the things we do. That's what I want. Mm-hmm. Can't get it all the time, but that's what I'm trying for. And let's see, what else can I say? We cover everything I'm interested in, everything I've done. We cover some things from my books. It's not all about my books. We explore a little bit of Jungian psychology. We explore a lot of James Hillman's archetypal psychology, and a lot of my own, which is different. I'm neither Hillman nor am I Jung, and mm-hmm. I differ with both of them, even though I take so much from each of them. So I include my own ideas about things, and at the end of it, people seem pleased. I don't know, for the most part. I know they're I've had maybe 125, 150 people go through the classes now. And I think my guess is only a few have not been happy, very mm-hmm. few, as far as I can tell. Everyone's very happy, and they feel that they've gone through deep changes. I've had some people who are in therapy with me at the same time as they do the course, and it's amazing how the 2 go together. That's mm-hmm. really intense exposure, and yeah. I see the big transformations. So I'm very happy to have more new people. We're going to start in January again, and we meet on Wednesdays at noon Eastern time, U.S. Eastern time. That allows people where you live in that godforsaken place. That beautiful place, absolutely beautiful place, to join us, and people in Europe. Unfortunately, Australians have to get up at 2 a.m. or else listen to it on recordings. Yeah. But it's been a great joy. I can't tell you. I just can't wait to start up again. It's going to be just slightly different this time. I think we're going to add a Zoom day. Like, I'm not sure how yet exactly, but we're going to have a day. One of those lessons will be an open mic Zoom session.
Yeah. Well, it's great because when you do the weekly presentations, like you said, the chat window's open, and you always take time at the end to go through people's questions and comments. Yes. and address them. So it feels quite up close and personal, which is nice. And for me, one of the things I appreciate about it is the kind of the style of the school or the course. It's not just inhaling a bunch of information. It's engaging if you want to show up for it. And that's the invitation is, here's a little idea, or here's an image or a concept. Now, how does it show up in your life? what does this mean to you? And so it feels quite like egalitarian or something. Yeah, it's
I
nice.
hope so. I hope so. Yeah,
It's refreshing.
I aim for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've thought about education ever since I started. Well, all my life, I think. When I was in my 20s, I was writing about education. I'm very interested in different kinds and exploring different approaches. And in my education, my own education, especially in my college years and university years, uh, I experimented with different kinds of teaching. You teach sometimes and while you're a student at the university. So I experimented with a lot of different ways of teaching. And so when it came to do this, I thought, well, I can do whatever I want. All these other places where I've taught, people are breathing down my neck, watching to see, what I'm doing and if they approve or not. Nobody's here to approve. So I feel very free. And I really have, I wouldn't do, if I didn't enjoy it myself so much, I wouldn't do it probably.
Yeah. And just to let people know, there are no PowerPoint presentations.
No PowerPoints, no. No PowerPoint presentations. No.
There's no, and also no like step-by-steps or things like that. So if that's what you're looking for, is something very didactic and here's how to live a soulful life, you're not going to get it there.
I think the way of soul is different from this more organized way. You don't follow, do things alphabetically or numerically. You don't put them in an order that's abstract. You do things as they come up. You mix it up. You wouldn't see much order there. People often say to me, do I have to take this course before I take the next one? And I say, no, it doesn't make any difference. If you get this one ahead of time, it'll probably help you with the second one, but there's no logical connection that way. We go from one thing to another. I think there is a deepening process, but it's not a logical order. No.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, I really appreciate you spending so much time with us, Tom. It's been great to chat with you. And I feel like, talking to you for my 100th episode feels to me perfect.
Congratulations for that. That is so great.
You're one person that's kind of been there with me on this whole arc from episode 1 to now. And that's really saying something, because I tend to be quite hermetic in the teachers that I check out, but, I keep coming back to Thomas More. It just feels to me so, your way is so grounded and balanced and generous, I think is a good word for it. And my wife's even reading Religion of One's Own right now, and she's read your Ficino book because she's an astrologer, and she of course loved that. But now she's reading Religion of One's Own, which is I think more reflective of your kind of approach to things. And so we're sharing that in bed at night as we read, talking about Tom Moore, and and that's nice because it's not dogmatic, and it's quite open, and we can just maybe it ferments a discussion that is alive. And we're not arguing over ideas necessarily. So that's nice.
Great. That's great.
So just lots of appreciation to you, and we'll see you again in January, I'm sure.
Okay, Brian, good luck to you. And let's think about the next 100th.
Oh boy. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
The Medicine Path is produced by Brian James on unceded Coast Salish territory, Vancouver Island, Canada. For more information, visit brianjames.ca. Music by Olive Artisoni, aka Greenhouse. Join the Medicine Path tribe and gain early access to episodes and the full podcast archives at patreon.com/Medicine Path. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall soft upon your fields. Until the next time we meet on the Medicine Path.